James Winters had everything his heart desired. Wealth, an impressive career, a name that carried weight in elite circles. But deep inside, something gnawed at him. His mother, who had recently passed away, had made one final request on her deathbed: make sure the family name lives on. James, once emotionally distant from the idea of fatherhood, suddenly felt an urgent need to create an heir. Not out of love, but out of duty. Through his private doctor, Dr. Elias Monroe, he began a discreet process. No romance, no relationship, just a business arrangement. The surrogate had to be reliable, preferably someone with no connections or resources. Someone who would disappear once the child was born. Monroe found her, Lena Brooks. A former nurse who had lost everything after the death of her husband. Now, she was sleeping under bridges and makeshift shelters with her 3 children. Monroe approached her with an offer that could change her life: housing, medical care, money for her kids. In return, 9 months of her body. Lena agreed, mostly for her children. In the first few weeks, she felt like a puppet in a game she didn't understand. Everything was arranged: the fertilization, the apartment, the nutrition, even her kids' school visits. But soon, something felt off. There were hidden cameras in the apartment. James visited with a clinical interest in her pregnancy but avoided any real conversation. He viewed it as a transaction, nothing more. But cracks started to show in James's facade. During an unexpected visit, he noticed Lena's daughter Sophie observing him with sharp eyes. She asked him about his past, his childhood. For the first time, he spoke about his mother, about the emptiness since her death. Sophie listened, not out of politeness, but genuine interest. James felt something he hadn't in years: connection. At the same time, strange things began happening. Lena received anonymous phone calls at night, a voice warning her, "You're not carrying the child you think." She was followed, received vague letters in the mailbox. When she confronted James, he denied any knowledge. But his eyes betrayed doubt. He too began to suspect things were happening beyond his control. Lena began her own investigation. She didn't trust Monroe. During a dinner, she secretly took James's glass and ran a DNA test. When the results came back, her world fell apart. The child she carried was not genetically James's. In panic, she confronted Monroe. At first, he denied it but eventually admitted he had intervened. The embryo used was not James's. Monroe had swapped the sperm. He wanted to prevent James from gaining more power. He was working with a shadowy group of shareholders who feared James's growing influence. Lena was just a pawn in a larger game of revenge and control. She could flee. Tell the truth. But her children were safe, for the first time in years. And the baby in her womb? She felt it grow every day. Her body, her blood, her heart. Everything told her this was her child. Not James's. Not Monroe's. Hers. Weeks passed. James softened, became more sincere. He began taking Lena's children on outings, brought them toys, read bedtime stories. He laughed again. He spoke of the future. Not with Lena, but with the child that would come. And maybe, subconsciously, also with the rest. But Monroe felt his grip slipping. He sent someone to Lena's apartment, supposedly for a medical check. Lena discovered the man had a concealed syringe. When she confronted him, he fled. She feared she was being targeted. James didn't believe her, until he saw the security footage. His world began to shake. He, who always controlled everything, had become a pawn himself. On a stormy night, Lena's water broke. In panic, she was rushed to the hospital. James arrived hurriedly, nervous but full of anticipation. This was the moment everything would change. The birth was difficult. Doctors rushed around. When the baby was finally born, an eerie silence filled the room. Nurses whispered. The doctor walked over to James with a grave expression and said the words that changed everything. The child was not his. No genetic match whatsoever. James froze. He looked at Lena, exhausted and teary-eyed. She knew. She had known. He felt betrayed, angry, but also lost. Everything he had hoped for slipped through his fingers. Days passed. James disappeared. Lena remained alone with her baby. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew one thing: she had fought. And her child, that child was truly hers. Meanwhile, James found documents in Monroe's office that confirmed everything. The embryo was from an anonymous donor, selected specifically to break James's lineage. Monroe was fired. James sat in silence for weeks. Everything he thought he knew had been a lie. Weeks later, James sat in a park. He thought about everything. The plan, the deception, the pain. But also Sophie. Her words echoed in his mind, maybe we were the child you needed. Not of your blood, but of your heart. Slowly, he looked up. In the distance, he saw Lena with the stroller. Sophie played with her little brothers. They saw him. Lena raised her hand. No anger. No conflict. Just a look of mutual respect. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was a new beginning. And in his heart, James knew, sometimes you don't get what you were looking for, but exactly what you needed.